Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad today to be with a dear old friend, acquaintance of many decades, Johan Vanderplaetse, who is Senior Vice President of Schneider Electric. I'm going to ask Johan in a few moments for his personal biography, and then we can kick off with some discussion over Russia and CIS. But just to say, I have known Johan for a very long time, and it's been my pleasure in that friendship and over the years. And I'll say it now for the audience. I've said it to Johan a few times. I think Johan is one of the most busy and efficient people I've ever come across in my professional life. And I don't know how you do it, Johan. But with that opening note, warm welcome. And please, a few words about you and your background, and maybe go into Schneider Electric for us.
Okay, Danny, thanks a lot. I don't know how I should interpret old acquaintance. Is this a compliment or is this more referring to our old age?
Compliment, I think.
I will take it as a compliment, thank you. Yes, indeed, we know each other a long time. Johan Vanderplaetse, I am a Belgian national, be it that professionally I have almost never worked in my home country. For the biggest part of my professional life, I have been based in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, mainly in Moscow, working there for different global multinational companies. Started with Alcatel, leading their activities in that part of the world. Then moved to an American multinational, Emerson, also responsible for Russia, Central Asia, and Central Europe. And then for six years, I was in charge of the activities of Schneider Electric in the role. I'm still with Schneider Electric, but no longer based in Moscow, because at the end of last year, they asked me to move to Switzerland, where I'm based currently, leading the worldwide sales organization of the industrial automation business for the group.
Thank you very much, Johan. And I knew you in the Alcatel days and ever since, indeed. As I know Schneider Electric, and I think many people will as well. But can you give us a little snapshot of the company and the people?
No, yeah, absolutely. Schneider Electric is a multinational company. It has some French origins, but we are really active across the world. Our company is active in two main businesses, what we call energy management, which is mainly around distribution and efficient use of energy, electricity, from where it is being generated till the place of consumption. That's the first part. And the second part of the group is focused on industrial automation, which is where I am working, which are all kind of technologies to automate production processes, manufacturing plants, and you name it, which is, of course, very well supported by a strong software platform. 130,000 people active across the world, market capitalization around 75 billion euro, sales close to 30 billion euro.
Thank you indeed. And of course, a lot of our mutual history together has been around Russia. And I can confidently say we're both Russophile.
Yeah.
We admire the country and the people. And you have a long history going back, I believe, to 1992. And really, this isn't a Russia discussion entirely, but it's played a big part in both our professional lives.
Yes.
And maybe there are examples you can extrapolate from Russia to other activities. And then probably the second part of our conversation will be around global trends and that. But please share with us your fascinating and perhaps ending sadly Russia story.
Well, let's hope that eventually it will again end in a happy ending, but it's not going to be for tomorrow, unfortunately. Yeah, you're right, Danny. I arrived in Russia actually still as a student back in 1992, which was the moment when the country had just opened up, the end of the USSR, the moment when everybody was looking into that big neighboring country to Europe that nobody really understood, but a lot of optimism. And during the 30 years that I've been working there, I've seen a lot of very good things taking place in that part of the world, with lots of growth opportunities, both for Russian companies, but also for international companies. A increase of the disposable income of the population. The Russia that I saw when I left, in many ways, was of course completely different from the hardship times that I saw when I had arrived in the early 90s. But yes, indeed, it ended right before I actually took on my new assignment. I did not know it was going to happen, the February 24th tragic events, but since then, all of a sudden, we are unfortunately in a completely different situation. And as I tend to say openly, I think there is an explanation of why it ended in such a tragic way as it has ended, and that's not the reason or the purpose of this conversation. But I think yes, Russia made a lot of mistakes, but also one can argue that the West, Europe, United States, they also made a lot of mistakes. Explanation to leading to the tragic events. But the explanation is, of course, not a justification of the invasion that we have seen, and the war and the killing and the blood shedding. So it is very, very difficult currently, and I am also not too optimistic, honestly, that short term, maybe even medium term, the situation is going to improve or normalize. The war seems to be in a block situation, but even if there would be a peace settlement or a peace agreement, which is going to be super difficult by itself, signed off, even then, I do not see a normalization that easily of the relations between the West and Russia. So I think indeed, fair to state that as long as the current Russian administration is in place, I'm afraid that we're really in a dead end.
I agree. I agree totally. It's long term. The track record from the Russian regime is long term waiting it out. And we can come back to energy, of course, later, and the impact on gas and Europe, greenification, renewables. And I know you have a very, very strong history of that. Going to Schneider Electric in Russia when you were there as a general manager, could you share us a few words on what the business was? And I think listeners and viewers, Johan, will be very interested in your exit, because obviously many companies are asking me, and I'm sure asking you, for example, as much as you wish to say publicly, how the exit was conducted and what the procedures were. But first of all, I suppose, how was the business and what was your experience?
Well, as I said, I mean, I have mainly good memories, absolutely, from the time that I was living and working in Russia, both for the three companies that I had mentioned, with a lot of growth, profitable growth, a lot of things that has happened. So very positive. But also, I've been reflecting again, maybe one more philosophical, if you like, observation. I've been reflecting over what I have seen in the country over those 30 years where I have been living and working in Russia. And back to the point why I think it will take a while before we see a normalization in the relationship. When I was living in Russia, basically, I've been engaged or working with three generations, you can say, even of Russian managers or politicians. And I like to start by saying two facts. First of all, personality is a big explanation of what is happening. And fact number one, a personality typically is created or is formed when a person is a teenager or when he's young. That's the first fact. And the second fact, when you're engaged with managements or politicians, is that managers or politicians, they tend to acquire positions of influence once they surpass 40, 45 years. That is also a second fact that we see everywhere in the world. Back to the point I want to make, in those 30 years, I've been dealing with 3 generations of Russian managers. The first generation, and then I was a youngster myself. I was 25, 26 years old when I started to work there. The first generation, the early 90s, those were Russian people who were formed in their youth in the 80s when you had the end of the Soviet Union. And that first generation of Russian management, but also politicians in general, I felt were very open to an engagement and an integration with Europe or the West as a whole, because they just remember from their childhood the hard times of the Soviet Union, and they really wanted to copy our lifestyle or standard or living. They really were hopeful in such a true integration. That was the first generation. Older people, I was 25 years old. They were 45, 50 years old, but they were very, very open and very, very welcoming. The second generation that I learned, quite frankly, and I do not want to generalize, I want to make that very, very clear. But in many cases, you talk about people who were formed when they were young teenagers in the 90s. Now, the 90s were dramatically difficult times for the Russian people. They were the times of the shortages, the empty stores. So those people, in many cases, they are making an association between free market or liberalism or the West with the hardship that they had seen when they were teenagers themselves. And on top of that, these are also the type of people which are getting their information from the state media, state TV, which I think is fair to say is not necessarily offering a very balanced view on what is taking place. And this is where these are the people who are currently 45, 50 years old. Again, I do not want to generalize, but indeed they have a much less positive impression of the West as the first generation that I had interaction with. I'm optimistic longer term because when I was in Schneider, I was working with the third generation who entered the workforce. These were the young professionals which are 20, 25 years old today. These were people which were not even born when Putin came to power. These are people which don't even remember the hardship of the 90s because it was too small. So the argumentation that you hear from the current regime that, okay, thanks to us, we saved you from the hardship of the 90s, it is not resonating. And moreover, this is the generation that is no longer taking their information from state TV. They're subscribed to Telegram, they're following the news on the internet, so they have a different, more open view. But they are 20, 25 years old. They do not control the levers of business or the levers of the political machine. So my hope is that once those people, they will become also 40, 45 years old, we will see change. It might have taken, at the end of the day, 3 generations for the full integration to come to a normal conclusion. But between now and then, I think indeed we are still going to face a very tense relationship, unfortunately, between the West and Europe. So that's a bit the philosophical observation, but I think it is important, and it's also explaining why I think sanctions all nice and well, but putting sanctions on travel restrictions or preventing the Paralympic athletes, Russians, to participate in the Beijing Olympics, visa restrictions, stopping collaboration between universities. These are the most stupidest measures, in my opinion, that you can take, because this is not at all helping an engagement with the younger generation, and we, on the contrary, we ought to reach out to them. So that's another personal observation that I would like to make. No, but business has been good. Danny, back to your question.
I know, yeah.
Business has been good, and Schneider Electric, until recently, we had 5 factories in Russia. We had over 8,000 people employed there. In the best years, we had close to €1 billion of business, of sales. So it was a very substantial business that we saw. But indeed, because of the events, we understood that we are now in a completely different reality. And the foremost important consideration of the cooperation was, okay, in that new reality, how can we at least safeguard maximum employment of the Schneider employees, which also have nothing to do with a geopolitical conflict. I mean, so do we just, drop everything and leave it behind, or do we find a mechanism whereby indeed we can ensure maximum employment? And we went for the maximum employment, and that is how we set up this management buyout, whereby indeed the management who replaced me actually once I had left. We have transferred the shares, all of them actually, to the local management, which are continuing to operate. Nothing to do anymore with Schneider Electric. It's now called System Electric, the company. They also acquired the Schneider factory, so they are producing in Russia for the Russian market under their own brand, their own technology, without any components or infeed coming from Schneider itself. It is a journey, it is a challenge, but we are confident that because of that journey and challenge, we will be able to secure the maximum possible employment in another way through that company. Again, I repeat, in which we do not have any stake ourselves for the future. So this is how we had set up the exit, if you like, of Schneider Electric from the Russian market.
Yeah, just one very quick point, Johan, and it applies to other companies, and Renault and Fats are in food and so on. I got the impression we had the 24th of February, and in some cases 8, 10, 12 weeks later, boom, gone. Factories, business, and that. Was it something extraordinary in the company as well? The speed of the transition.
Thanks God, Danny, that we don't face such kind of dilemmas every week or every month, or not even every year. So it has been indeed a painful decision. I mean, our company, we have invested massive resources in setting up local production on the market. But the drivers which led us to come to that decision, there were a number of them. First of all, in our type of business, we are heavily engaged in selling equipment to oil and gas, the energy sector, per definition, which is a sanctioned, in many cases, sanctioned end users or sanctioned technologies. So that's, we are obviously a law-abiding company. We follow very diligently trade compliance rules. So if we are not able or allowed legally to sell, very, very clear. We are not selling. That is very obvious. I mean, if you are a company in a completely different sector, consumer goods or logistics, where you do not have any sanctions, you might have a completely different kind of considerations. So that is one of the considerations. A second consideration that we had, Daniel, is that, we said, Paul, we take out the business that we can no longer develop because of the sanctions. There is other business that is allowed. In many cases, however, you talk about dual usage equipment. So you need to have an army of own lawyers or trade compliance people to make sure that this is not being used in an improper way. And then also we calculated, we said, look, I mean, if we are still continuing to do business, knowing that we are not allowed to do business in certain sectors, the total revenue of our business in Russia probably will drop, I say something from 800 million to 200 million. While our own company is now already 30 billion, and we are globally growing 10% every year the last years because of the mega trends, which I would like to talk about on energy efficiency, sustainability, or just accelerating. So if all of a sudden you don't longer do 800 million of 28 billion, but 200 million out of 30 billion is less than 1% in a global business which is growing 10% year by year. So is it worth the reputational risk, the other risks that you have, and the fact that you have to hire lawyers, a trade compliance business to continue, or do you find a way whereby you say the priority is basically to maximize the employment post Schneider Electric of the staff? We chose for all those kind of reasons for the second option. But again, Every company will have to make its own assessment and judgments, and it lots depends on the exact segments of the economy in which you are operating.
Absolutely. Quick one there, Johan. You've seen it in my reports, and I'm sure you know it. I'd say 25 to 33% of all companies will have left or downsized completely by Christmas. De facto de jure. In technology and automation, that's 60-65%.
To my point.
But on the other hand, to your point, pharmaceutical and health, 5%. So, you know, there's a different reputation, a different business model.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to grill you on this, but I know it's such an important topic for people and one of great interest on the MBO. It's announced, of course, and we all know that you had local authorities engaged in the transaction. What was the relationship there?
Well, the local authorities, obviously, there again, according to the local regulations, the regulatory has to approve the transfer of the shares. We followed diligently that rules as well. I must say, for the local authorities that we interacted, they were concerned about, again, the employment. Do what you do. Is it a way that you can maximize the employment, irrespective of who is actually employing them? And also the fact that the factories were transferred to local management was, of course, not necessarily something that was negatively looked upon by the local authorities. So I can say that from that angle, we did not really have any major issue.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you, Johan. And I'll just reiterate, I share your, strategic analysis on Russia. I think it's a very, very long time that this crisis will stay with us. As you say, it would require a change in the authorities at the federal level. And even then, and I know you're thinking on this as well, we both know there's no guarantee of anything wonderful transpiring after that. So it's a generational shift and a sad one. And we can talk later about the Eurasian partnership between China and Russia and the other parts of the world as well. That's another geopolitical risk. But really now, a change of tack and mood, perhaps. A start-off question, actually, which I didn't mention before, was, so Schneider Electric now out of Russia. Are there markets on the periphery where you're looking for compensation psychologically? I'm thinking of Central Europe, Turkey, and the CIS, maybe Saudi, Dubai. Is it that any of these neighboring peripheral states have acquired more importance because of the move out of Russia or not?
It's hard at this particular stage to fully give an answer on that. We do see some dynamics. Indeed, what we start to see is that there is a step up of interest again in investment in the good old oil and gas business in places like Kazakhstan, which is not at all sanctioned without any doubt. So if the majors, the Western oil majors, BP, ExxonMobil, Total, disengaged from Russia, knowing the fact that oil is there for better or worse still for a considerable amount of time, we do see that there is a shift of investment taking place by those companies in other markets. Now, if you talk about the shift of investment, everything which is there to support the investments, going from the technology, but also the logistics is following. So indeed, I think in the Central Asian market, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan are, if you talk about CIS, good light spots. On top of that, in many cases, more and more supported by qualified Russian staff who also migrated away from Russia to those parts of the world. So I think indeed this is a thing that we see. Globally, there are other markets which are growing, of course, quicker than the others, not necessarily maybe connected with the Ukrainian events, but the Indian market for us is, without any doubt, a massive opportunity, a massive growth market in which we are doubling down as well in our own investments. There are other places in the world as well. Good old Europe, Western Europe there. Our business is getting still strong, without any doubt. I mean, we announced a couple of weeks our Q2 results. No, Q2 results are a reflection of the past quarter, but if you look forward in what we see in Q3, Q4, we are still seeing that bookings are holding up very strong. So just like everybody, we are trying to assess the impact of possible, recession with the high energy prices on the overall European economy. So I think actually looking forward, Western Europe might be a more difficult geography than quite some other places.
Thank you, Johan. That specific question about geographies, taking you to your new global role, sort of repeating the question in a different way, really, but looking at the whole globe and not the relationship with Russia, Ukraine or anything. You've mentioned India already and referred to Europe. So could you give us a tour d'horizon? And actually, I'll push you into, a very interesting part, and I know you know a lot about this. So could you make some more remarks maybe about, well, obviously China and the US and that. Sure. And then my follow-up question would be, where does that take us on supply chain and digitalisation in those markets?
Yeah, no, yes. Well, look, I think it's also clear, and we had a conversation like that before. I think the trends towards deglobalization started well before the Ukrainian crisis, and I feel that it has an implication on our operational model and the supply chain model. That the days whereby a global company could produce and develop a technology, say in Silicon Valley, and from there sell it all across the world, or the other way around, develop something in China and from there sell it all across the world, those days are gone. And those days are gone, and I talk about software, but I talk also about just equipment. They are gone for a number of reasons. First of all, the geopolitical reasons. But secondly, as well, the fragility of the supply chain, as we have seen over the last quarters, even more in focus. Why is this happening? Predating already. Europe, pick that example. Europe is no longer accepting in its telecom infrastructure any equipment which was made in China by a company like Huawei for rightly or wrongly perceived security threats. So the equipment shipments from Huawei to Western Europe stopped. Likewise, China is no longer, or is limiting the importation of equipment from Western technology into their markets. Then you have things that happened, like the sanctions or the prohibition on American and other microchip producers to sell microchips to Chinese companies, but as a consequence that China is massively investing in developing its own microchip business. So this is all happening, and one of the eye-openers I quite frankly had in my new role in how intertwined it all is or was, and how we are entering into a new reality when you talk about globalization, was when I was in Cairo talking to the Egyptian Ministry of Agriculture, when those people were saying, 70% of the wheat and the grain that we are using in Egypt is imported from Ukraine or Russia, back to Ukraine in Russia. Today, the prices are going up. For us, Egypt, it's sufficient that the price of bread is going up by 10-15%, and we might have a social revolution. Mm-hmm. As a consequence, business opportunity for us. What do? They invest massively in irrigation of, it's called the Delta region in Egypt, so that they are more independent and no longer have to rely so much on imported wheat and grain. So for all kind of reasons, we believe if you want to be and you want to retain to be a global company present everywhere, you need to have what we call a multi-hub strategy, supply chain, whereby you are producing and developing your technology in the markets which are close to where you're producing and developing it. And on top of that, in such a way, you're also, of course, addressing supply chain risks that we have seen in the COVID era, or if there is an earthquake or a flooding, and if you only have one factory, you have a problem. So this is accelerating, and the way that I look at it, Danny, I look at business as the universe, or in Russian they would say the cosmos, whereby you're having a number of planets, and then across every planet in the universe you have moons circulating. Now, without any doubt, there is in the business cost, there is the planet United States, where you want to produce in the States for the US North American market. There is without any doubt planet China, with its massive population. That is a market in itself. And we are having our own China for China policy within Schneider Electric, which is really, really very extensive. It is not just producing equipment in China for China, but we're also having the in-feed, the components sourced from Chinese vendors, and we do the R&D in China as well. And the business, the sales decisions in China are made by the Chinese people, not by management in Paris for the Chinese market, so that we can stay really relevant in that part of the world. And then you are having moons, which are circulating around China, many African countries as the example, moons around the US planet, we see as well. And then the question is, where is Europe and where is Russia? And I think that's why I think it's a lost historical opportunity. Eurasia, Europe and Russia combined, could have amplified each other and could have been a planet in its own right. Indeed. But now, on the contrary, it looks like Europe is just a moon around the US planet, and Russia becomes a moon around the Chinese or the Indian planet. This is the reality that we see. But again, to my point, if you're a multinational company, I think that such a multi-hub strategy is going to be a critical element if you want to stay globally relevant everywhere in the world.
Thank you, Johan. A couple of points. I want to flag for the audience that you were the first person I ever heard, on this theme. It was about 2016, 17, when you were kindly speaking on a panel there, and I took notes and I followed it, and I followed your comments ever since then. Definitely, the local for the local, and what you say about China is fascinating. You talk about, planets and moons, and Europe being perhaps a moon, and I understand that, just as a joke. I'm too embarrassed to ask what the United Kingdom is. It's a little bit of a meteor, piece of stone floating around, but bouncing into France occasionally. So anyway, we'll see. We've been talking about many things, Johan, and supply chain has come up a lot, and it's a key thing with all companies, as you know. I just wonder how Schneider Electric is managing supply chain globally, and you've alluded to that with China and local for local, but a little bit more detail, please, and very much on the EMEA region.
Well, supply chain, of course, is critical if you want to service your customers. And the thing that we have learned over the last 6-12 months is the necessity to have a truly diversified supply chain. As I mentioned before, the days that you could deliver across the world, all your stuff from one place that is finished. So what we try to do is that for every single product line that we're producing, we make sure that there are at least 2, ideally 3, or even sometimes more factories in the world which are producing that equipment. We also make sure that for our own production, we are sourcing the necessary components, or in-feed as it is called, as well from multiple vendors, or if it's from one vendor, then we are auditing that particular vendor is also having the possibility to manufacture the components, the in-feed, in multiple sites across the world. And in certain cases, we go even one layer deeper, the supplier of us. So that if we are, God forbid, again, in a situation of lockdowns or flooding or fire or whatever, whereby either one of our sites is affected or a site of our supplier is affected, that this does not have any impact on our own supply chain. So we have invested a lot on the robustness of the supplies and the manufacturing that we're having. This is nothing to do with the geopolitical reasons that I already talked about it. It's just, a solid, good practice to make sure that we can service our customers in an uninterrupted way.
Thank you, Johan. I should know the answer to the following question on what kind of supply you use, but I can make a guess. And I learned a lot when the crisis was on about, supply chains and costs and everything. Overall, globally, are you mostly sea, air, or land rail supply? How does the actual transportation work?
I think it's pretty diverse. It's
All
hard
right.
to say. It depends also a little bit on the locations that we have to serve. We had 6 months ago a situation whereby we were afraid to ship to go overseas because of the fact that the ports were in many cases clogged. And on top of that, we had already challenges in supplying our equipment in time because of the shortage issues. So there indeed, often we used air freight, but air freight, of course, then has as a consequence that it's much more expensive. But in certain cases, the customer, of course, is willing to or was willing to pay a premium as long as they got the equipment quicker. I think today, Danny, we see again from that point of view a normalization of the supplies. Yes, indeed, if it's not urgent and if we can ship it, we still prefer freight or train. But in certain places which are difficult to reach or where there is an urgency, of course, we still go with air freight.
By the way, Johan, just on this, you may have seen at the height of COVID, you know, the logistics companies couldn't get transportation and so on. And I've seen film and photographs of this. One of the logistics companies, you know, they hire an aeroplane. And as you know, when we're traveling on planes, the belly is full of cargo and so on. The logistics companies were hiring planes, filling the belly. But of course, it was their plane. So they were putting boxes and shipments on the seats. On the seats. So, you know, row 5A, every seat and every aisle and every toilet was full of Amazon boxes and so on. And some of the boxes were traveling business class. Anyway, that's another story. Just related to this, of course, and you talked before about India and key markets and so on. We're seeing, you know, changes in localization and how people think about that related, as you've said, to supply chain. You know, we're hearing about reshoring and friendly shoring and cluster shoring and everything else. I just wonder, Schneider Electric in general, your, you know, investment manufacturing or R&D plan and warehousing, etc. Are you planning more physical infrastructure building or renting? And semi-joking, I suppose, do you plan to build a factory outside Paris in the near future? Or, you know, or in America coming back to the big markets? Or is it more traditional localizing abroad for cost? Just wonder what the dynamics are.
Well, I think the bigger priority that we have currently is, of course, the digitalization of our existing manufacturing plants.
Right.
We are a company which is a market leader in industrial automation. The latest technologies that we are offering on the market are allowing massive improvements in production processes, reduction of OPEX, energy efficiency, very, very important. Now, it is only logical, Danny, that if we are promoting a sound technology on the market, that we're using it ourselves in our own factories. So the principle of eat your own meal, as we call it, is being implemented, which is for us the right thing to do, because it is indeed bringing massive efficiencies in production. But on top of that, obviously, in all those markets, we are having reference cases whereby we are inviting our own customers to see what the powers of digitization on things like digital twin, predictive maintenance, asset management, remote control is able to offer. So that is, I think, from Schneider perspective, the key priority nowadays.
Right, thanks, Johan. We've seen, I'm just going to follow this up on digital and then move to HR. We've seen, you know, the massive increase in e-commerce retail during COVID. And, you know, it's starting to slow down, normalize, but at good levels in many markets. Just, you know, maybe it's a cliche question. Have you seen a bigger drive in your business and sales and customers wanting more digital because of COVID and the crisis?
Absolutely. I mean, COVID has many bad aspects to it. But I think probably two of the positive consequences of COVID is, of course, first of all, We all continue to work in a hybrid mode. 3 days we go to the office, 2 days we go remotely. It's I think many companies are doing that, showing quite some efficiencies there too. That's one thing, but also the way that we are reaching out and interacting to our customer. Absolutely, e-commerce has accelerated, and the interesting thing is that it started with the more simple, what we call transactional products, like small circuit breakers or plugs, so to speak, which are easily to be ordered and shipped online. But what we do see is that even complex automation technologies are already today being ordered and delivered via e-commerce tools, which we are delivering ourselves. We have our own websites, of course, which we also deliver via the websites of the big mastodons, the Googles and the Amazons of this world, but also our own distributors through whom we are working or having their own websites, and we're also using that as a tool to reach the market. So yes, absolutely. If the overall growth of Schneider is roughly 10% year on year, the e-commerce growth is 20, 30, and for certain technologies even 50% growth. So it is a big change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Johan. And one comment there about leading me into HR and people. You talked about 3 days in, 2 days out kind of thing, offices. Yeah. My first question, and then that's the lead into the HR, is just on offices. Schneider Electric globally, because of the 3-2, are you reducing your office footprints and square meterage, or what?
There as well, absolutely. I mean, even pre-COVID, of course, like many companies, we had implemented open workspace, the era that every person had his own office, that is already a long time gone. But what we also see, absolutely, is that because of the hybrid workforce, the number of square meters that we are needing is much less. So in almost every site, we have either reduced the square meters that we need for offices or subleased. And if we are, of course, leasing new property, it is in a much more flexible way. So there, indeed, I think a reduction of office space is a fact, absolutely.
I've had the pleasure of meeting, I believe, your global head of HR, and that was very enjoyable. On HR, that could be another couple of hours conversation, but, work from home is the first driver of many. What are, and back to our theme of Russia and everything, I think we both agreed HR and talent in Russia was and is very, very high, good level. I see historically Central Europe being very strong as well. But now you've gone more global. What are the dynamics and big drivers you're seeing in HR?
Well, I think, again, we already saw before one global headache, which is a shortage of qualified engineers. It is what it is. It is everywhere in the world. It was the case in Russia, but it's the case in the United States. It's the case in places like India. So that is one thing. But another big HR driver or concern, if you like, is the fact that what we just talked about the acceleration of digitization and software means that we have an additional dual challenge, if you like. I mean, first of all, in many cases, we are an organization which traditionally was wired and which is coming from the traditional automation world, the hardware world. Of course, we're trying to retrain our own staff so that they are also fluent in speaking the software, the IT, the digital language. But it is a big challenge. It is also a challenge to attract the quantity of people that are able to communicate in that new reality. That is our own challenge as we have in Schneider Electric. But on top of that, remarkably, when we then sell to the customers or to the end user, they have the same challenge. They are also not really having sufficient staff which are really understanding in detail the value proposition of digital solutions that we are offering. So in many cases, I call it the kind of a dilemma whereby we have OT-wired people trying to sell software IT platforms to OT-wired end users. So you will understand that that kind of a discussion is not an easy one. So in that respect, what we do is, of course, we retrain massively our workforce. We attract the right missing skills. In many cases, if we are retraining our workforce, we are actually at the same time doing joint programs with our own customers or own end users, so that they go through the same retraining process as our own people are doing, also to upgrade and to upskill the engineers and the people which will have to use the digital tools that currently became available on the market. So that, I think, is the biggest thing that we have. If there is a bottleneck, it's not the technology. If there is a bottleneck, it is the people.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. One closeout question, Johan, and it's been extremely enjoyable. Just on the HR thing, and you can answer in general terms, you know, the money. We're seeing global inflation, and many of our group members are coming to me with stories and anecdotes, you know, in Central Europe or Russia. You know, we gave last year for the budget of 22, we gave very generous increases of 4, 5, 6%. And those very generous increases seem much less generous to the staff who face consumer price increases of 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15. I'm thinking, by the way, one example would be Poland, you know. Now, my point would be, you know, we all think, consensus is that inflation will come down. It won't collapse, but it'll moderately come down. I think one challenge, a big challenge for HR is calendar year. Most people are starting their budgets now in the next couple of months, when inflation will still be high. So one of the problems is if staff hear about the proposed budgets, you know, and that you're saying, don't worry, Istvan, Ismail, Sandra, inflation is going to come down next year, you know, how persuaded they'll be. So I think my long-winded question, Johan, is, are you seeing, because of what you said, are you seeing big pressures on the salary remuneration front? And are you coping with those? Or is it just a normal, regular problem?
No, there has always been a pressure in that respect, but I think indeed we are in a remarkable situation that in many places in the world we are facing an inflation rate that we have not seen in our lifetimes, or older people like yourself and myself maybe still remember the late 70s, if you like, but it's a new situation. But then again, I think the answer to it is you have to look country per country. We are in a diverse situation. First of all, from a legal requirement point of view, and also from a market labor point of view. From a legal requirement point of view, pick the example of my home country, Belgium. Employers are obliged to give a salary increase, which is at least following the official inflation rate. So there, indeed, the Belgian Schneider Electric employees, we follow the law without any doubt. In other countries as well, of course, the biggest thing is how do we stay competitive on the market, and their competitiveness means both towards the employees, so to make sure that the package that they're getting from Schneider Electric in all the aspects, because thanks God it is not necessarily only about money, but is a competitive package. But at the same time, of course, we have to make sure that if you make adjustments to the salaries, that because of that, the product and the manufacturing is also still competitive on the market. So we are weighing that dilemma on a country per country basis. We are monitoring very, very closely what is taking place on the labor market. We are monitoring very, very closely data points like voluntary attrition. Are we lower or above the average in the industry? With that tracking and with the measures that we do, and sometimes with one-off specific dedicated salary increase for really critical people, we are in a position to navigate it for at least the foreseeable future. And then indeed, let's see what will happen 6 months, 12 months down the road.
Exactly. Thank you. Just a little footnote from me, Johan. You brought it to my mind. We've seen a number of companies, I'm not saying a majority even, but we've seen a number who in the last 4 or 5 months, and probably the next 4 or 5 months, they'll do their budgeted salaries, but they have given, or they will give, bonuses ad hoc, and that could be 1 month, 2, 3 weeks of salary. It doesn't affect the base salary, and it's recompense, and generally the feedback from staff, of course, has been very very positive.
Exactly.
So that's way to
exactly.
Johan, I'm wary of our time, but just, is there anything we've missed out or you'd like to finish off on? Or
I think we covered quite some topics as far as I'm concerned. Maybe we talked too much, even, I don't know.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Johan, I knew this was, I've taken, I think, 5 pages of notes, my little future PowerPoints. So really, Johan, I knew it would be enjoyable and fun. Thank you a million for this.
Always.
And I look forward to the next time on panels, and I look forward to presenting to your colleagues and everything. And I look forward to our next next in
Maybe if one day you have more a specific either a panel discussion on things like the new energy, what it all means, the gas prices, the climate change, how do we see Schneider Electric to look at it as an opportunity, quite frankly. What can technology do? What are the mega trends? I mean, I'm more than happy as well to talk about that one. You have a very, very strong story there.
Great. Well, the next one, and there will be a next one in a few months, let's say about 3 months or so, let's do exactly that, because everybody will be sitting in their freezing homes with no Russian gas. So they'll be interested in how you're going to solve it for them.
I'm happy to share the vision that you have there.
Great. Johan, thanks so much. And we're doing this on a Friday, so very good
Enjoy
weekend.
the weekend. Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.